Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 3 league winners that are not super obvious. We're not going to be talking about those super early round guys, the Justin Jefferson, the Christian McCaffrey, that are blatantly obvious, could be league winners if they hit in the first round, right? We all know how good those players are. So we're going to be talking about 3 league winners that not a lot of people are talking about that I think have the upside to bring you to your fantasy football championship and ultimately win it at the end of the season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into these 3 league winners that are not super obvious. We begin at number 1 with Diontae Johnson, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers, current underdog ADP, wide receiver 35 at pick 68.2. Last season in 2022, he finished as the wide receiver 39.5 PPR and the wide receiver 52.5 PPR points per game. Now, if you drafted Diontae Johnson last season based upon where he was going, you definitely felt like he was a big fat bust. He absolutely reeked compared to what I thought, because I loved Diontae Johnson last year, and anyone who drafted him obviously was immensely disappointed. But when you actually dive deep into the numbers, there is one glaring reason as to why he didn't have a great season in 2022, and I think that that reason is going to be gone in 2023. So last year, he played in all 17 games. He had 147 targets, 8.6 per game, ranking 6th at wide receiver. He had 86 receptions, 5.1 per game, ranking 13th. So he was top 13 in both targets and receptions, which is great. He had 882 receiving yards, 51.9 per game, 27th. Not the best, but obviously not terrible. Where things went completely wrong for Diontae Johnson, where he metaphorically kicked your team directly in the balls, was he had 0 total touchdowns. Now, if you look at his career as a whole, this makes 0 sense. In 2019, 16 games played, 5 touchdowns. 2020, 15 games played, 7 touchdowns. 2021, 16 games played, 8 touchdowns. So from his rookie year until 2021, every year he scored more touchdowns than the year prior. But then in 2022, he hit us with a fucking left hook from Canelo, and he scored 0 touchdowns. 0. Which is bad. Now you might be thinking, Nick, Kenny Pickett has sunk the ship of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Nick, Kenny Pickett is going to bend this team over the table and not even use an ounce of lube, right? Some people might think that, and I am not even the biggest fan of Kenny Pickett. But ultimately, Diontae Johnson last season was force-fed the rock. It didn't matter if Trubisky was in the game or if Kenny Pickett was in the game. Mike Tomlin clearly wants Diontae Johnson to get the ball. And I know there's a lot of George Pickens fans, but ultimately, George Pickens isn't going to magically overtake Diontae Johnson as the target getter in this offense, the main target receiver. Some interesting efficiency stats for Diontae Johnson last season: 875 unrealized air yards, number 2 at wide receiver. So if the quarterback play steps up a little bit, if the offensive line gets better, because the offensive line was awful last season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, then I think Diontae Johnson really has that upside to be a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football. We've seen him put up humongous numbers in the past. He had 250 total route wins, 11th at wide receiver. So he's a great route runner. 15.1% juke rate, 4th at wide receiver. Now, I thought the dropsies were a thing of the past. He dropped 9 balls last year, number 2 at wide receiver. That sucks. But if he gets 147 targets again, this man's eclipsing 1,000 receiving yards. This man is not scoring 0 touchdowns. He's going to get at least 5. And he is a complete and utter steal at wide receiver 35. He has the top 12 upside again. I'm not saying the Pittsburgh Steelers need to be the best offense in the NFL. I'm not saying that Kenny Pickett needs to magically transform Autobots roll out into Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, right? One of these great quarterbacks, Justin Herbert in the NFL. He doesn't need to. He just needs to be a little more accurate, and Diontae Johnson's ceiling is the moon. Moving now to number 2, we got Daniel Jones, quarterback of the New York Football Giants, current underdog ADP quarterback 14 at pick 111.3. Last year, he finished the season as the QB9, but he was the quarterback 10 in points per game, playing in 16 games last season, so only missed one. 472 pass attempts, 29.5 per game. Number 14, 3,205 passing yards, 200.3 per game. Number 15, 15 passing touchdowns at a measly 3.2% rate, 21st. 5 interceptions, 32nd, but the real kicker here, why I love Daniel Jones so much, is the rushing upside. Now I know, Nick, Lamar Jackson didn't play all year, so these numbers he didn't play the whole season, so these numbers are a little skewed. Sure, 120 carries, fourth at quarterback, 708 rushing yards, 5th at quarterback, and 7 rushing touchdowns, 3rd at quarterback. So even if Lamar plays the whole season, we could easily see Daniel Jones finish top five in all 3 of those categories. This is a team that did a complete and utter 180 from the prior season, 2021 compared to 2022. Brian Daboll looks like a fucking genius compared to the Stooges that have been the head coach of Daniel Jones-led teams in the past. And Brian Daboll is the quarterback whisperer of sorts. Now, again, this is another situation. I don't think that Kenny Pickett's going to turn into Mahomes this year. I don't think Daniel Jones is going to do that either. But he does not need to. He doesn't need to. Brian Daboll already shape-shifted this man into a much better quarterback. 94 true passer rating, 8th. 60.7 QBR, 7th. Career highs last season. He had his most passing attempts, his most passing yards, his most yards per attempt, his most completion percentage, his highest completion percentage, his most rushing yards, and his most rushing touchdowns. And he did that with a dead-beat wide receiver core. Isaiah Hodgins had to come from fucking Narnia to become the number 1 wide receiver on this team, right? They had nothing at wide receiver, and Daniel Jones still played well and was still running the ball a ton. And it's not like these are all just design plays for Danny Dimes. Sure, could Brian Daboll design a run for Daniel Jones? I guarantee you he does it. But a lot of these times, he's trying to look who's open. Kenny Golladay is shoving his thumb up his ass on the sideline. Daniel Jones turns into Mike Vick and just runs around people, runs through people, right? Daniel Jones is a fucking monster of a man. And he has his best weapon core yet. Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson. They draft Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Saquon Barkley obviously on his side now. Nick, Saquon Barkley's dealing with some contract issues, sure, but I feel like those things are going to be, the Giants are going to do right by Saquon. I don't know if they're going to give him as much money as he wants, but I don't think he's going to hold out. I think he'll be there come September, which is what you need. And then they bring in Darren Waller from the Raiders. I know Darren Waller kind of has that injury history, but let's be honest. If Darren Waller plays fucking 12 games, this is levels ahead of what he's had in the past. It just is. And maybe Wan'Dale, there's a reason why they drafted Wan'Dale so high in 2021. Or 2022, technically, my bad, 2022. There's a reason why they drafted Jalen Hyatt. Now, will Jalen Hyatt pay off? Will Wan'Dale Robinson even pay off? I'm not sure. But this is the best receiver core, in my opinion, that he has had. 15 passing touchdowns, 3.2% rate. 3.2% rate is extremely low. If he gets that to a 5% rate, he's throwing 20-plus passing touchdowns. It doesn't take some Jimmy Neutron level brain blast to figure out that Daniel Jones has what it takes to be a great fantasy quarterback. Now, will he ever be the guy getting the Brinks trucks backed up for him, those comically sized fucking checks sent to his house like he's Kenny Golladay? No. But is he good at what makes a fantasy quarterback good? The rushing. Yes. He wants to run people over. He wants to run the ball. And he got significantly better as a passer. His whole career, that was the best I've ever seen this man pass. I think if you want to poke fun at Daniel Jones, like, oh, you remember that time against the Eagles when he ran, he fell on his ass when he was running 1,000,000 yards into the end zone? Yeah, I do. Sure, he's not, he doesn't look like a quarterback. He looks like an accountant. But at the end of the day, Daniel Jones has the coach, he has the best wide receiver core, and he has the rushing upside to finish as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football, which would make him, by the very definition in the Webster Dictionary, a league winner. But before we can get on into my number 3 league winner of today's video, I would like to give you guys a word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we've talked about them in today's video. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play best ball fantasy football this summer. What best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football, the draft. That's it. You do your 18-round draft. There's no trades, no waiver wire, and no in-season management. Underdog automatically puts the highest scores into your lineup every single week. They have the biggest best ball tournament ever. $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $3 million in first place, $15 million in total prizes. If that seems like a little too high of a price for you, that's fine. They also have a $5 to enter tournament, $1 million in total prizes. If you click on the link in the video description, if this sounds entertaining to you, this sounds like a fun time, you want to get into this, click on the link. You get a $100 first match deposit bonus up to $100. So you deposit $100, they give you an additional $100. If you want to deposit just $25, they give you an additional $25, $50, and additional $50. Make sure you guys check it out. I love Underdog Fantasy. I've been blasting off drafts on there. I always tweet out my teams afterwards on Twitter if you guys want to check that out. Again, link in the video description. Back on into things, my number 3 league winner that is not super obvious is Khalil Herbert, running back of the Chicago Bears. Current underdog ADP running back 40 at pick 122.2. And I expect his ADP to move. I expect that by the time we get closer and closer to August, the promised land, when a lot of people are drafting, I think Khalil Herbert's going to move up a bunch. Running back 39 last year in half PPR, 41 in half PPR points per game. But that's not really telling of how good Khalil Herbert is, because he only started 1 game and he only played in 13 games last season. 129 carries, 9.9 per game, number 36. Even with just 129 carries, the man had 732 rushing yards, 56.3 per game, number 33. So basically 10 carries a game, 56 yards per game. Now, his targets, receptions, receiving yards, all low. 12 targets, 9 receptions, 57 receiving yards, 5 total touchdowns, 31st. But what's interesting about Herbert is his efficiency stats. 5.2 true yards per carry, 5th. 5.7 yards per touch, 7th. 39.1% juke rate, 7th. 69.4 run blocking rating, which was outside of the top 40. And even with the bad run block rating, he was still able to put up all these great numbers, as well as 3.29 yards created per touch. Now I know, Nick, they drafted Rashawn Johnson. They bring in Diontae Foreman. They still have Travis Homer. They bring in Travis Homer. They have Tristan Ebner, and they have Kari Blassingname. No idea who that guy is. Sounds made up, but he's on the team. Okay. Diontae Foreman hasn't really done anything in the NFL. He's okay. If Khalil Herbert gets hurt, and, maybe Diontae Foreman could become the starter, but if Khalil Herbert's healthy, there is no way in hell Diontae Foreman's breaking through and becoming the guy. Rashawn Johnson's the guy to worry about. At Texas, he was Bijan's number 2, the right-hand man, and he's good. So I'll give it to him. He's good. But Khalil Herbert has proved it at the NFL level, and Khalil Herbert, in my opinion, will have an easy path to, at least by week 1, he's going to be the starter. Now, if he's as good as I think he is, he should be able to hold that job down. Is he going to be a 70% snap share guy? Probably not, because they're going to want to work Rashawn Johnson in. I think Khalil Herbert's actually better at passing than his stats say. It's just the fact that David Montgomery was getting a lot of pass-catching opportunities last year. Let's just be honest. So I don't think Khalil Herbert's dust at pass-catching, but I don't think that's necessarily where he shines the most. Last year, when Montgomery was hurt early in week 3, he played a couple of snaps. He gets hurt against Houston. Herbert went fucking bananas. 20 carries, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 169 yards and 2 total touchdowns. This man had 169 total yards and 2 total touchdowns. Now, that's against Houston. The Houston defense sucked balls last year, right? They were terrible, bottom of the barrel. So sure, take that with a grain of salt, right? I don't expect him every game to have 160 plus yards and 2 total touchdowns. Of course I don't. But what I saw in that game was, look at this. Khalil Herbert is good. The stats, the efficiency stats are true. He passes the eye test. This is a Bears team that's getting even better. And I mentioned the run blocking rating because they drafted an O-lineman super early in the NFL draft. I think the O-line's going to be better than last year. Now, again, are they going to magically be the 7th or 10th top 15 unit in the NFL? Probably not in terms of O-line. But anything better than last season will be great. And this is a team that's going to be able to move the ball a lot because Justin Fields is amazing. So Khalil Herbert, I think, is in for a breakout season, and he's in for being a league winner in 2023 fantasy football. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Thank you guys all so much for watching again. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great guys' day. And as always, good boy.